Hi BookTube and welcome to a new video. This is a tag video. This is the 20 random questions tag, which was originated by Steve Donahue. A couple of years ago I did his, I think it was 25 random questions, or might even have been 50 random questions. So this is his follow-up next batch. Steve tagged everyone, but I first saw Jason over at Byways in Bookland's version. So I have glommed on to that. Question 1. What's the nearest place to you that's so famous everybody knows it? And how near is it? Well, it's probably Wembley Stadium. It is 3 tube stops away from my local tube stop. I grew up in that area. Yes, so the achievement of my 50-odd years of life is to have moved 3 stops down the same tube line. I used to be able to walk to Wembley Stadium as a school kid, and I used to go watch all the England games. Football games, except Scotland versus England. I was never allowed that because the Scots were quite boisterous. But in fact, the fans that caused the most trouble were the Welsh. Whenever they came down to Wembley for a game, they were definitely looking for a fight, whereas the Scots were just looking to get drunk and have a good time. Now, that was the old Wembley Stadium, which was pulled down and rebuilt. Can't remember exactly how long ago, not that long ago, 15 years maybe, 12 years. And at the time, because we lived in the area, the local sort of council area, we were invited to apply for tickets for an exhibition match, which was used to sort of test the new stadium in terms of security and safety. And it was about a third of capacity. And so all local residents were invited to apply. And we went to see an exhibition game involving a celebrity team. I can't remember who they were playing. Maybe it's 2 celebrity teams. And so we were sort of one of the first to get a look at the new stadium. And I felt at the time that while it was all sort of, brand spanking new and shiny glass and white concrete, that it would actually corrode quite badly. And at the time I was writing a dystopian novel called An Eye for an Eye for an Eye. And I used a version of Wembley Stadium that had decayed very quickly in that book, and I described its features. So one of the things is there were these sort of shooting fountains where there were sort of holes in the concrete, and then the water would shoot up. And kids obviously love that sort of stuff. And Wembley, when it first did it, people got sick because the water wasn't treated. So, things like that I employed in my novel. 2, have you ever had a paper cut so bad you thought you might die of it? No. 3, have you ever found anything genuinely valuable in a used book you bought? Only enlightenment. 4, have you ever read or met or married Jacques Barzun? I don't know who he is. This is a very American-centric question, Steve. 5, aside from your pets, what is the specific non-human animal you see most often? Unfortunately, it's flies and maggots, because the wonderful thing about recycling culture is that in the summer, whenever you put organic waste in the bin provided, if there's any meat in it, it draws the flies to lay their eggs, and your recycle bin, every time you open it, it just swarms with heaving maggots. It's disgusting. In the past, we had a compost heap in the back garden, and admittedly you wouldn't put meat on it, but it was very useful for organic waste. But this whole thing seems rather, while I support recycling and natural sort of wastage, the whole fly thing is disgusting. I will say, since lockdown, been spending more time in the garden, I've seen a lot more sort of sunlight striking off slug trails on the grass and around the tree and stuff, which are rather beautiful. They're a bit like spiders' webs in a way, once the sun strikes them. But I haven't actually seen any of the slugs. And finally, the other animal we see most of, which I think is quite a common answer, is magpies. Because they are the bullies of the garden bird kingdom, and they keep the garden clear of other species. So we see loads of magpies. 6, have you ever been inside a cathedral? If more than one, do you have a favourite? Yeah, I've been in loads of cathedrals because I've travelled quite extensively around Europe in my youth. I don't have a favourite cathedral for the simple reason that I rather object to the architectural use of casements to filter light, so you get ribbons of light, which on an illiterate and superstitious congregation are used to attest the presence of the divinity of God. So no, I don't have a favourite. 7, have you ever been actually seeing and hearing things delirious. When I was 18, I caught chickenpox, which is quite late to catch and can be quite dangerous. And I was bedridden for a long time with it. And early on, I did have a hallucination, I think under the high temperature, where I imagined I had Clint Eastwood at the end of my nose and a nun, that he was, they were in some sort of interaction. So that was very weird. The other notable thing about my bout of chickenpox, or two notable things about my bout of chickenpox, it was touch and go whether I was going to be fully recovered enough to take my A levels, which are the exams you take at 18 to get you into university. I lost a lot of revision time, but I did make it. And the other thing was my godfather sent me a porno mag to aid my recovery, which I think is a rather strange act, really. That's the only porno mag that has ever played a role in my life. And also, if you're ill, do you feel like enabling the actions that a porno mag is supposed to? I don't know. I just found the whole thing odd. We've never been particularly close, so that seemed to be an act of great intimacy somehow. Certainly great presumption. The other time I had, I suppose, a slight hallucination is one of my final days at university. We'd done all our exams. We were just waiting for the results and graduating. And I had 5 what are called garden party invites on the same day. So all the colleges in Cambridge, they all have these sort of rather nice grounds. And in the summer, weather allowing, you hold what are called garden parties. And as I say, I had 5 on the same day. And I plotted a path where I could work. I started with the furthest one away and then worked my way back, coming closer and closer to college. So by the time of the 5th one, I was completely out of my head on alcohol. Managed to sort of scramble back to my bed in my room and just collapsed on it. But I will, the room definitely was spinning around me. And from that, I wrote a flash fiction story called The Cosmologist's Hangover. 8. Do you have blood relatives who read for pleasure? Yeah, both my parents read when I was a child. I wouldn't say they read canon literary fiction, you know, Dennis Wheatley, Leon Uris, these type of writers who I've never read. But my mum still reads to this day. She tends to read sort of memoir and books about politics in other countries, i.e. not Britain. So she recently got a book about Korea, a book on Trump. I say she recently. She refuses to come into the computer age, so I have to order books of her on Amazon, which plays merry hell with the recommendations I get based on some of my shopping history because of the books she orders. 9. How many species have you smooched smack dab on the lips? Define lips. 10. Do you ever listen to the radio? Yeah, I listen every day to the radio. I listen to sports radio, which is perhaps might disappoint some of my followers who believe me to be highbrow. But no, I listen to sports radio, and particularly a show between 1 and 4 during the week every day called Hawksby and Jacobs, because they're a really funny team and they work well off each other. It's quite interesting to see the relationship. You know, they're not stand-up comedians, but they're not dissimilar. So you get that sort of straight man, funny man chemistry, and that comes over the airways, which is, I think, quite impressive. But prior to that, like anybody else in Britain, I listened to John Peel, the Radio 1 DJ, who managed to outlast all of BBC Radio 1's sort of cosmetic makeovers. He was the big bad uncle who played the sweary stuff and introduced you to exotic music like reggae and dance music and things. He was years ahead of his time with each new music wave. And I used to listen to him like everybody else in 14, 15, you're supposed to be in bed, asleep. And like everybody else, I had a little handheld transistor radio under the sheets if I heard my parents coming up the stairs. And a couple of years ago, I read a biography of John Peel, which totally allowed me to relive my childhood and youth. So I'll post a link at the bottom to my review of that book. It's not going to mean anything to anyone outside of the UK. But anyway, one of the few gods I have, I suppose. Unfortunately, he died. I met him because I used to work in a music shop, and he came in occasionally looking for records. And he was such a dapper dresser, all in black, little goatee, rings on every finger. And one of my colleagues said that his wife was late in delivery of one of their children. and would John Peel mind playing something for her? So Peel played Napalm Death and said this is to induce labour for Ruth. Well, he was a total star. And also had a fling with Germaine Greer. 11. Have you ever been to the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa and the Louvre? Yeah, I've been to all three because I'm a European and they're on my doorstep. Although I'm not going to be a European from December the 31st, and they won't be on my, even though they will still be on my doorstep geographically, I'm now going to need a visa to go visit them. Gee, thanks, people of Britain. Yeah, I've been to the Louvre. First of all, it's been ruined by that stupid glass triangle. Like, French presidents build architectural monuments to themselves in a way that the British don't. And I can't remember, was it Mitterrand had that stupid glass triangle in the Louvre, the sort of gross 21st century architecture in the middle of the Palace de Louvre from whatever century that was built in. It's just incongruous. My favourite, I have two favourite museums in Paris, although one of them doesn't exist anymore. The Musée d'Orsay, which is in an old railway station, has all the modern art, the Expressionists and Impressionists. That is far better if you're into that sort of thing than the Louvre. But my favourite museum was called the Museum of Orientalism, I think, because of course France had quite an extended empire in Southeast Asia, so it had lots of stuff that the colonists there had nicked, including treasures and statues from the Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which is my all-time sort of favourite human architectural structure. And there was this one room where it was really low lit, it was really dark, and there were all these Buddhas sitting on the floor, and the effect of them being below your eye level, or your natural eye level, plus the low light. It was just one of the few spiritual experiences I've ever had. It was stunning. And unfortunately that museum moved, and I hadn't been to Paris for many years. I went with my wife 3 or 4 years ago, and where it had moved to was sort of within a stone's throw of our hotel, so it was really convenient to go visit it. And unfortunately, when I went, the sort of that floor, the Cambodian floor, was shut. So I couldn't go and revisit it. And I suspect that it probably hasn't reopened since. I don't know quite what the story with it is. And I also wonder that when they'd relocated, whether they kept that low lighting. I mean, as I say, I don't think I'm ever going to get a chance to see it again. But if I did, I really hope they preserve the low lighting, because it was definitely an out of this world experience with the low light and all these Buddhas around. Question 12. What little thing do you miss most? What little thing do you miss most that you've lost due to the pandemic? Nothing. The pandemic, I hate to say this, I don't mean it lightly, it's been good for me, as we'll see in the next question. The only bad thing about the pandemic is the risk to your life you take every time you step outside your front door. A veritable sword of Damocles. So that is kind of scary and just keeps me inside even more. But being kept inside as much as possible is, a boon for me. So question 13, what little thing do you miss least that you've lost due to the pandemic? Well, I no longer have to commute to work, which is a boon. I don't have to keep 9 till 5 work hours. The terrible choice of food on offer in the milieu of my office for lunch, I'm no longer, completely vulnerable to that. Are you detecting a theme here yet? Question 14. What's your relationship to small talk? Hate it like acid? I like acid. Love it, merely competent. Well, I hate it. I'm afraid I have very little tolerance for small talk. I'd rather be having big talk, but equally, I'm antisocial enough that, even though I'm a writer, I've never been attendant on dinner parties where you have big literary talk. So I get no talk, really, which is probably my own fault. Have you ever won money at gambling? Yes, I have. First of all, I do the lottery in England. And they recently introduced one where instead of having these sort of, one-off payouts of millions of pounds, there was one where it's called Set for Life. And if you win the jackpot, you get £10,000 a month for every month for 30 years. And the odds are slightly better on that one, and it's cheaper to enter, although I'm sure they'll put the price up once it's hit an anniversary. And more often than not, I get my stake back on that. So I've never won anything significant, but I would say since lockdown, I'm probably no more than £20 out of pocket because I keep getting my stake back in winnings. So that's pretty cool. But my actual gambling career, well, I am the son of a compulsive gambler. And from the age of 13, I was dragged to GA meetings. So I have a bit of a sore spot about gambling. But having said that, there was a brief period where I wanted to put my football knowledge to the test, and I signed up with an online betting agency. And I put this bet on for Australian footballer who played in England called Tim Cahill to score against Newcastle and to be booked in the same match. I think the odds were 10-1, and he duly obliged. And I think I won £18 or something. And then, of course, I spunked that back on other bets. And by the time I'd used up that £18, I closed my account. So I'm not a big gambler. Although maybe you could see it that we gamble every time we step outside our front door into the air of COVID. 16, do you ever give money or time to charities? Yeah, I work for one. So I'm paid for it, but I do work for a charity, as does my wife, although not the same charity. And also when I do a sort of periodic book purge, which isn't very often, I give those books to Oxfam. There's one in my locality. I have to get a bus because it's too far to walk with tons of books in a laundry bag, but I do give them to Oxfam. 17, do you craft? Knitting, crocheting, woodworking, pottery throwing? Have a guess. So when I was doing woodwork at school, I didn't realise that the work I was planing had slipped below the level of the wooden vise, and I was actually planing the wooden jaws of the vise, thrown out of woodwork. When I was doing art, I didn't realise that every time I dipped my paintbrush into the water to clean it for another colour, that I was spraying painty water on the wall behind. And the art room had just been redecorated, and I was hauled up by my art teacher and told, come back at lunchtime, you have to repaint the walls. And I did turn up, and I think he was quite surprised that I turned up. He said, well, I didn't really have to do it, but it's good that I turned up. So I was sort of thrown out of art class. Yeah, I'm completely hopeless. I'm in the bottom 5% of the country for spatial awareness. So, yeah, I mean, I love art as a sort of appreciating art myself, visual art, but I'm completely hopeless with my hands. If it had been known when I was growing up, I would probably be diagnosed dyspraxic. 18. Do you talk to yourself when you're alone? No. I think to myself when I'm alone, but I don't talk to myself. And I suppose I talk to myself when I'm composing in my writing, but I don't compose aloud. And I don't look at mirrors either. So I'm not talking to myself in a mirror like some people do. 19. Are you a social queen bee in college? Well, funny enough, for such an antisocial person as I am now, I was sort of one of the satellite centres of our social group at college, and I didn't drink, but I was just as badly behaved and had just as waspish, uninhibited tongue as anyone who drank profusely. And so in that way, I was sort of the sort of magnetic core of our group because, as I say, I didn't get drunk, so I could always help people home. But I could participate as an equal by the old banks. 20. Are you a sunrise person or a sunset person? I don't really understand this question. I mean, if I'm awake before sunrise, I'm going to be bloody annoyed. And sunset, I've usually passes me by because I've got my head in a book or I'm writing myself. So I'm not really an appreciator of either. And why would I be? Because they're just markers of time slipping away, really. In answer to that other question, what do you miss most about lockdown and COVID? It's not that I miss the sense of useful, purposeful time. I just feel like time is slipping through my fingers. This is a year none of us will ever get back. Now, that's not to say I haven't been doing loads of writing, because I have. But I have the greater sense of this is a year of which I've been not in control of, and it's just slipped through my hands. So there you go. That's my answers to the tag. As I say, Steve has said everyone is tagged, so I don't need to tag anyone specifically. But do have a go. Until next time, thanks very much.